Katie Watson.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Odoo, provider of an all-in-one management platform with a suite of fully integrated applications designed to simplify and connect every aspect of business in one software. More at odoo.com.
General Motors is scaling back its self-driving vehicle unit. It's GM's Cruise subsidiary, and it comes after California regulators pulled Cruise's permit to operate robot cars after a terrible accident, saying the vehicles pose a, quote, unreasonable risk to the public. Our Lily Jamali is following this for our program Marketplace Tech. Hi, Lily.
Good morning, David.
Remind us of the year that this Cruise subsidiary has had. It led to the company halting operations across the country. What happened?
Yeah, so this all started actually with some good news, believe it or not, for the company. In August, regulators here in California, they gave Cruise the green light to expand its robo-taxi service in San Francisco. A day after that approval, a bunch of Cruise vehicles got stuck. They blocked traffic in a neighborhood there, the North Beach neighborhood. And there were other mishaps too, but the turning point came in October when a Cruise vehicle dragged a pedestrian who had been hit by another car. This Cruise vehicle dragged her for about 20 feet, and the woman suffered serious injuries. There was a dispute about whether Cruise initially shared with regulators all its video footage from that incident. And ultimately, they ordered Cruise to halt operations in the city, and the company has now suspended trips across the country.
Now, this is altering the way people are thinking beyond Cruise, but the way they're thinking about self-driving technology more broadly.
That's right. You know, when I covered tech the first time 7 to 8 years ago, there was a new self-driving tech launch happening seemingly every week, and I have the tacky swag from that era to prove it, David. Cruise, with the long runway that GM had given it, was one of the companies left standing. Google's Waymo is another. Missy Cummings, who is a robotics expert at George Mason, she expects Waymo to move extra carefully now after what's happened here. But she says that industry-wide, autonomous tech still has a long way to go.
Fundamentally, there are problems in the computer vision systems of these cars that we do not know how to fix. And until we figure that out, this technology is not going to be ready.
Warning from Cummings there to take it slow because in her view, Cruise moved very fast, too fast.
All right, and now back to General Motors cutting spending to this technology. You can expect layoffs at Cruise. What does it mean more generally for GM?
Well, the future of Cruise isn't clear, but departures in the C-suite don't paint an especially bright picture for them. You're right that layoffs are expected, and this company employs about 3,800 employees. Cruise does plan to relaunch in one U.S. city soon. We don't know where at this point. In terms of GM's investment, when the company bought Cruise in 2016, its technology was supposed to be a big growth driver for them. Now they have this big hurdle trying to build back trust with regulators. That's something Mary Barra's been talking about a lot when she's been asked about Cruise. And that points to ongoing interest in Cruise. But like so much in tech, Cruise burns through a lot of cash. Hundreds
No, it was a railroad view.
The December 4th, 9 a.m. City Council meeting is hereby called to order. And I will ask our clerk, Ms. Susan McCord, to please call the roll.
Ms. White Boyd? Here. Mr. Vollison?
Here.
Ms. Moon Reynolds? Here. Ms. Sanchez Jones? Here. Mr. Pretty?
Here.
Vice Mayor Cobb?
Here.
And Mayor Lee.
Here, and a quorum is present. Let me next note that council meetings will be televised live and replayed on RVTV, Channel 3, on Thursdays at 7 p.m. and Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 5 o'clock p.m. and video streamed through Facebook Live at facebook.com/Roanoke, VA. And council meetings are offered with closed captioning for the deaf or hard of hearing. If you will allow me, before we get started on the business today, I'd like to have a word of prayer for the officer that was wounded last night here in the city. If you would stand, please. Eternal God, our Father, we come to you at this time, thanking you for this day that you'd allowed us to come together to do the business of this city and valley. Lord, we ask your blessings on the officer that was wounded last night during the performance of her duties. Lord, we ask you to strengthen her and touch her body. And Lord, we ask you to strengthen her family. Let them know that you can do all things, and we thank you. And we're going to believe that because we know you as a healer, we know you as a deliverer, and most of all as a Savior. It is in your Son's name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. I am pleased now to turn the legislative session of our meeting today over to the chairman, Mr. Pretty, and he will conduct the meeting as we go forward.
Thank you, Mayor Lee. The time, I'll wait for the secretary to get set.
Okay.
The time is now 9:06 a.m., and I will call the meeting to order. Will you please call the roll?
Mayor Lee?
Here?
Mr. Cobb?
Here.
Mr. Pretty?
Here.
Ms. Moon Reynolds?
Here.
Ms. Sanchez Jones?
Here.
Mr. Vollison?
Here.
Ms. White Boyd?
Here.
Natasha Saunders? Joyce Watkins? Quorum is present.
Ms. Watkins is here. There is a quorum. Well, thank you everyone on this committee and the public for being here today to focus on our 2024 legislative program. This is something that we have been working on all year. If anyone knows from working with the legislature, though, every item that we continue to work on is always ongoing. It's not just 1 year, it always moves on into the next, whether it's something that gets done then or it's something that we have to reevaluate as our priorities change. This program has gone through multiple meetings, originally intended to be presented in October due to a small scheduling snafu, but we now have it today. But that has given us an opportunity to evaluate with the new sitting members of the General Assembly what are the priorities that we see as most realistic that we can move forward, and what are the things that can most benefit the city. We now have two new legislators who will represent the city of Roanoke that have not in the past, Delegate McNamara and Senator Sutterline. And we're really going to be relying on them in addition to Delegate Rasul to help carry our priorities forward. But we've lost the number of representatives that we have in this area, but I'll recognize, Senator Sutterline has also reduced the number of localities that he has to represent, so I hope that he'll be able to make Roanoke City more of a priority than he has in the past. With that, I know there are going to be a couple new topics that may be introduced today, either in public comments or as I've given an opportunity to our new Chief of Police, Chief Booth, in order to put some public safety priorities in front of us. He was not currently the chief when we had our deadline for request earlier this year. It'd be my request to members of this committee that we go through the program, we go through all of the public safety requests, we hear feedback from our legislators and their representatives, and then feedback from the public and their comments before we make any motion about adoption or amending of this program. It would also be my request that if we're to make any substantial amendment to this program that was not presented to the public prior to today, that we try and have unanimous consent amongst this committee. It would be my hope that in years going forward that we adopt a program that everyone on this committee and council can support, and we don't have items that may have some back and forth going forward. With that, we will move into the presentation of the program. Are there any questions from committee members before we do so? Okay. Well, and for those at home, if you go to roanokeva.gov and go to the calendar, these items are available to view online. So as we focus on our legislative priorities, these were structured in a way to really focus on what is impacting the city of Roanoke. We're dealing with learning loss. We're dealing with concerns with public safety. We see an increased need for mental health funding. But it's important that the items that we select are ones that we know that this legislature, that will be divided between the legislature and the executive administration on what priorities they might be able to come to agree to together. So with that, our number one issue for our legislative priorities is Education 12 funding. These are based on the recommendations of the 2023 JLARC report on SOQ funding formula, and these reflect those that are in the governance and budget section of Roanoke City Public Schools. I'd like to invite Dr. Alan Siebert up here, who's here today, just to give a brief overview over what these mean for the school system and what it will mean for the city of Roanoke overall and its students.
Chair Pretty, members of council, mayor, vice mayor, thank you for this opportunity to represent Roanoke City Public Schools. We appreciate the collaboration we've had along the way, and thank you for your participation in the events we've hosted as well. And we certainly do thank you for lifting up the JLARC study. The JLARC study is very large, very comprehensive, many, many pages. So what the school board has done is picked out 3 or 4 items that we think are of highest import and greatest opportunity. Again, you've helped us by incorporating by reference our positions in recent years to try to continue to seek the full repeal of the support staff cap. That remains part of that. But really what we're looking at this year is 2 things related to the at-risk add-on. The at-risk add-on has been a funding mechanism for school divisions and meeting population needs. And over time, it has become relied upon. So we like to see it moved into the SOQ proper, not as an add-on, make it part of the actual funding model. And then second, if you look at that methodologies, some communities like Roanoke City, where we have qualified for the community eligibility provision for a number of years, a great thing to our children and families we serve in terms of providing them no-cost meals to those students and families in all of our schools. But that methodology then means that we do not collect free reduced lunch applications anymore. And without that data trend for the past many years, we now have a gap between the population we're serving versus what we're actually getting credit for. So JLARC also recommends looking at that methodology, and we support that approach because it would be just more accurate in terms of the children we serve and other CEP divisions in the Commonwealth. Again, we've had lots of conversations with you on these other things. If there's any particular chair or members would like, or mayor, anybody like me to speak to, I'm happy to do it, and certainly happy to have Vice Chair Watkins with us today.
No, thank you, Dr. Siebert, and thank you for being here today. I know that you're heading, is it to Norfolk after this for
VCU.
VCU for the Education and Health Summit after this, and I know a few of our legislators will be going there today, including Senator Edwards, and Delegate Rasul, I believe, is already there to get a head start on things.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item on our agenda is mental health and public health. Number 2, the items that we've included under there are the funding for the Catawba Hospital Transformation Plan, and our legislative priorities very much focus on the plan that was developed prior to last session of the General Assembly and was put forward, the one that's recommended at $147 million to be funded for the transformation of Catawba Hospital. This was a real lost priority last year that last minute in the budget was replaced again with yet another study, although I believe enough studies have been done, but we know what the priorities are for this area. The second item we've included to relate to public health is local regulation to limit smoking in public places to designated areas. This is related to requests we've had in the past for parks and recreation to limit smoking in parks. We have the ability to regulated as it relates to amphitheaters right now, but not all of our parks. And we've had other recent issues as it relates to the bus station. Number 3 is affordable housing. Affordable housing is a true need that we see across the Commonwealth, but particularly here in the city of Roanoke. And this committee wanted to look at what are some things that we could do in the legislature to help focus on that. In the interest of trying to save paper, I produced one to just investing in existing and underfunded programs. You can find these listed in the Virginia First Cities legislative priorities. There's a number of programs that are listed there today. I believe those have been provided to all of our delegate senators and their representatives. Namely, brownfield restoration, some economic development funds, some affordable housing funds. But one fund that's in there that is promoted is a pilot program for 5,000 families. This is something that was sought in the legislature, believed by Delegate Coyner in the past in the budget, and Senator McClellan, that would seek to provide funding for 5,000 families to help them make sure that they're paying no more than 30% of their income towards their rent, which should be the goal for anyone in this nation. Moving on to measures to address gun violence. We have 6 priorities under here today. These include requiring a permit to purchase firearms and ammunition, requiring safe storage in residence where a minor is present, prohibit firearms from being left in an unlocked and intended vehicle, classifying BB and pellet guns as weapons on school property, and then a new one including the City of Roanoke and the Safer Communities Program, and finally an increase to HB 599 funding, which is financial assistance to local police departments, and something that we rely on here in the City of Roanoke to help support our compensation and pay generally for our police department. All of these items either came as a recommendation from the Gun Violence Commission or have been adopted in the past by our school board. Although the one as it relates to the Safer Communities Program is something that I found in the budget that was passed this last year that focuses on localities that have high murder rates as it relates to gun violence. There were 3 localities that were provided additional funding, although this funding goes to focus at underlying levels of issues related to gun violence, whether it's education, mental health, and also public safety in some form. And knowing with what we're seeing in the city of Roanoke and the reports day to day, I think this is a program that the city of Roanoke could benefit from, and we hope to pursue this in some way, shape, or form, whether or not it ends up as inclusion in the Safer Communities Program or increased funding in a different area. Our 5th priority is transportation and economic...
Mr. Chairman, could we go back to item number 4 again? Are we,
yes, sir.
What are we making an effort, or we're asking the legislature to help us get into the program where these cities of Norfolk and other cities are being funded? Is that what we're...
Yes, sir, Mayor Lee. So this program doesn't include a specific piece of legislation, but it is an item that is requested in the budget. Each of these localities are being in the next fiscal year will be provided $2.5 million in order to be a part of this program and to decide where this funding should go to help support these issues. The City of Roanoke was not included there based on the data that was in, I believe, the July 2020 violence assessment by the Virginia State Police. But I think with recent numbers, it's something that we could request to be included in.
Okay. Yeah. Since 2020, things have changed a little bit. Okay.
Things have changed a little bit. Any further questions at this time?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Moving on into transportation and economic development. The first request was a request by the Hotel Roanoke Conference Center Commission to amend the Virginia Public Facilities Act to allow certain tax revenues to pay for capital expenditures at Hotel Roanoke. This relates to a bonding authority that currently has a sunset in the Virginia Public Facilities Act that they're seeking to extend by a few years. It would also include a definition of what's allowed to be used under those bonds, which would include capital expenditures for certain projects that aren't currently eligible at the Hotel Roanoke. And that's it's a little more dense of a general laws and fiscal policy, but we plan to have future meetings with our legislators. We know we have some drafts in, we just don't yet have commitments on who may carry what until we can discuss the financials. Our second request is funding to support Roanoke-Blacksburg Regional Airport improvements. C is funding to accelerate safety improvements on 81 without tolling. D is direct aid to public education to support Goodwill's Excel Center. These included budget amendments that were sought by Senator Edwards and then Delegate Head last year, and it's my understanding that Senator Head may reintroduce it in some form that seeks to provide additional funding to the adult education high school that's at the campus on Melrose. I know the city made a substantial investment using ARPA funds with a piece there, but this would include an investment from the state to help support operating and, I believe, construction expenditures. Last year, there was an amendment to code that was carried by Senator Edwards and Delegate Head that did authorize their ability to operate this high school in the Commonwealth. Number 5, E is increase the Black, Indigenous, and People of Color Preservation Fund. This is a program that's administered by the Department of Historic Resources and provides funds specifically to either localities, nonprofits, but it has to be for eligible properties that already have a historic marker and have some historic or cultural significance as it relates to Black, Indigenous, or people of color. And looking at the number of sites that we have in the city of Roanoke, the investments that we're making ourselves locally, seeking an increase to that fund so that it's a revolving fund would be something that would help benefit us as we seek going forward. And I do know that last year, the Christiansburg Institute sought some of those funds, and so it should be a priority I hope will be supported by Senator Sutterline. Before I move on into public safety, are there any questions from committee members? Okay.
I don't have a question, but I did want to make a statement.
Yes, ma'am.
Comment rather, with regards to under number 5B for the funding to support Roanoke Blacksburg Regional Airport improvements. I just want to comment that I know, being on the Roanoke Valley Allegheny Regional Commission as well as the Transportation Policy Organization, that there was resolutions adopted in support, sending it to the General Assembly in support of improvements over at the airport, as well as I know there was a resolution also from Roanoke County in that respect for support of the improvements as well. So I'm glad to see that we have it in our legislative priorities.
Thank you, Councilmember Moon Reynolds. Some of these priorities that were included were taken rather directly from looking at the other programs that are adopted in our area. I will note, it was discussed at our last meeting that the language here today just focuses broadly on improvements and does not look at any particular area of a runway extension. In my understanding, the city of Roanoke would like to wait and see what the public feedback is on adoption of a federal plan prior to taking a position on that.
Right. I just wanted to bring that for the record.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just wanted to add on to Ms. Moon Reynolds that the Roanoke Valley Allegheny Regional Commission created a legislative committee this year and is having its own legislative agenda, and we've added the Roanoke Airport to that agenda as well.
Thank you. This was an item that was funded in the governor's introduced budget last year. It did not mention a runway extension, just improvements broadly, and it was funded at $200,000. So ultimately, the budget that passed the General Assembly did not include that specific funding in there. I'd also invite members, but we're not going to go through them line by line. We have a number of updates that have been provided to our policy statement, including line numbers. These include making sure that the city takes a focus on legislation that would allow us the ability to preserve and support our tree canopy structure. It also relates to a number of charter change requests, constitutional amendments, and within them we've housed all of the position papers or the priorities that were adopted by Roanoke City Public Schools, and make sure that the public has an opportunity to review them and provide feedback before this is adopted. With that, we will move into our items for public safety in the interest of time. And I believe we have a representative of the police department today, Chief Deputy Stokes, who's here. Do you just want to be available to answer questions if there are any? Yes, sir. Okay. We'll write through these. If you are following along, this is the very last page of the packet that is included on the agenda online. It will look a little out of place because it comes after the policy statements, but it's item number 6, and it also includes 6 items of its own that were provided by the Chief of Police. As mentioned earlier, he didn't have an opportunity to submit requests when they were provided to this committee in, I believe, August. But at the request of other committee members, including Councilwoman Trish White-Boyd, I wanted to give an opportunity to our chief to let us know what some of his priorities might be that we could adopt and support. These include, the first one is prohibiting the sale or transfer of armor-piercing ammunition. In follow-up conversations that have happened with our legislative liaison, it's our understanding that this is broadly covered by federal law already, although the chief of police has mentioned issues that are being seen with bullet casings that are found at certain crime scenes that have armor-piercing legislation. And whether or not this is something that we seek specifically in state law or if it's something that needs to be refined at the federal level, I think this is something that would be important for us to include in our legislative priorities. The second one is supporting controls on possessing or manufacturing auto-sear devices and the possession and manufacturing of self-assembled firearms. Auto-sear devices, to my understanding, are some item that can be put onto a firearm that makes it operate like a machine gun, so that it empties its entire chamber just by holding the trigger down. That, I believe, was addressed in some level in some recent federal legislation, although there was state legislation that was provided last year and should be available in your packet to review that was carried by Don Adams and co-patroned by Delegate Rasul to address this issue. And then the next item as it relates to manufacturing of self-assembled firearms is what's broadly referred to as ghost guns. This also has been addressed in some federal legislation, but there may be some work that can be done at the state level. Next item is a request to oppose the elimination of mandatory minimums for firearms offenses. It is going to be my recommendation to this committee that we postpone action on this item for now and continue to look at it throughout the next year. This legislative committee in November of 2020 adopted a position that sought to support Senator Edwards' legislation that would repeal all mandatory minimums. This one has a different position there. I understand that there are different philosophies on this topic, but I think it would be important to allow an opportunity for both Chief Booth or one of his representatives and or members of maybe an opposing ideology to come speak to this committee about what those positions are before we rush into taking a position on that.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Did Chief Booth include some of this in his update? When I met with him last week, I understand that he did submit something in writing to the Legislative Committee. I'm just wondering what it entailed. It may have already included this.
This item was included in there.
So
all 6 of these items are. You'll have in your packet.
You said it was included?
This was included.
Okay.
All 6 of these items were ones that were included by Chief Booth.
By Chief Booth, okay. I just wanted to make sure we didn't overlook something that he was interested in having on the legislative agenda.
Yeah, it's all 6 of these that are included in here right now. And from talking with our liaison, I do want to note that not taking an action on this today, I don't want to be misconstrued as support for mandatory minimums or opposition of this. It would be no position of this committee at this time until we've had an opportunity to review it further. There are a number of code sections that relate to this that have been provided in your packet, and that would just be my request as we go forward. Item D is supporting reciprocal agreements for law enforcement certifications. This is trying to address the police recruitment situation. Governor Youngkin had the Bold Blue Line initiative last year that would seek to improve on this. From talking with our liaison, we're not certain what exactly was meant by legislative request. I think this is more an advocacy request as it relates to the Department of Criminal Justice Services. Current section of code already allows for a waiver for local police departments to be sought, but it has to be approved at the administrative level. And something that Governor Youngkin has helped support our administration in doing is provide these shortened training programs, where typically an officer from another state would have to go through 30 weeks of training through a program that we have here. They're abbreviated programs. They're called Option V, Option 5 training academies that they could then do instead in order to transfer quicker to our police department from other states. There's just certain base level criteria, like how many years they've worked in another state, and we want to make sure that anyone that we're bringing over meets the standards that we have for our law enforcement personnel here. Item E is enhanced funding for community policing programs, which would be sought in the form of a budget amendment. And item F is increased funding for youth vocational trade programs. In my meeting with Chief Booth, he focused on the need for opportunities for our youth as a true deterrent to crime. And despite my attempts to try and keep our legislative agenda under one page, I think it's fitting, facing what we're dealing with in the city, to have two items overall that relate to public safety on our legislative priority list. Are there any questions from committee members at this time?
Mr. Chairman, let me state, to re-emphasize these measures that are brought forth by Chief Booth and public safety. Those things are critical to us, especially in an urban area. Enhanced funding for community policing programs, increased funding for youth vocational trade programs. I'm hoping that our legislators will see that as we go, the General Assembly meets again, and consider those programs that are essential, I almost feel, for especially in an urban area, which is what we have, and dealing with gun violence. So I just want to share that and hope that our legislators will see fit to work on that, especially that area of community policing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Lee. Vice Mayor Cobb?
I would just reiterate what the mayor said, and I, while I don't have issue with, it's not removing is the right word, getting more information about the reducing the enhanced mandatory minimum and the chief's request to oppose any legislative proposals that would do that, I think it's really critical that we discuss that with the while we're seeing an increase in prosecutions of cases, which is good, I have concern that we would just eliminate any mandatory minimum sentences, particularly with the uptick in gun violence. We have to be able to hold people accountable for these crimes, and without having some kind of a minimum, I think that opens the door for some serious concerns. So I just would urge us to keep this on the forefront of our discussion and perhaps have some follow-up conversations with Chief Booth and Deputy Chief Stokes regarding this.
Thank you. Any further comments before we move forward? Yes, Councilmember Reynolds.
Thank you. I would like to piggyback on what the Vice Mayor just said. And when talking about further conversations, is it appropriate to have some conversations with the Deputy Chief on that matter? Since we're talking about the legislation now with the our area legislators here, just a little bit of what the thought process is for wanting to put this into the legislative program.
Of course, and I invite Chief Deputy Stokes up at this time to do so. I will say, in the interest of time, we have legislators who are trying to get out at 10,
Right,
so we can keep from a full breadth conversation.
I appreciate that.
The floor is yours.
Mayor, Council, thank you. Yes. So Chief Booth actually solicited some kind of feedback from his command staff, and he's relatively new, and we've been working here a bit, and that was one of the things that we identified. That's also identified by the International Association of Chiefs of Police as a national priority for ensuring that people are held accountable, just as my Vice Mayor mentioned. There's been success in past on things like Project Exile, Project Safe Neighborhoods have used some of those laws that have mandatory minimums to ensure that people that use firearms and acts of violence are held accountable to the highest extent, and we support that completely to, again, ensure that there's accountability for using a firearm illegally, carrying a firearm illegally, and we want to send the message that that's not acceptable in Roanoke.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any other
Deputy.
questions? Thanks.
Thank you. For the public's information and the delegation here today, I'm sure remembers, the last action that was done by the General Assembly of mandatory minimums was in 2021, legislation in the Senate that sought to repeal all mandatory minimums made it through to conference with a version from the House that sought to only remove mandatory minimums as it relates to drug-related crimes. And so there's definitely still debate amongst what the solution should be there at that level, but with our current administration, I wouldn't really see anything being signed that would remove mandatory minimums under Virginia Code. With that, we will move into comments from our legislative delegation. I would like to remind the public and our delegation that at the end of the policy statement, we do mention that we support the legislative programs of the Virginia Municipal League, the Virginia School Board Association, and Virginia First Cities legislative programs. Alan, if I could just ask, is the School Board Association's one yet publicly available? Okay, but once that is, we will forward it to members of the committee to make sure that there are no items that we have any concerns with. And with that, we will move into members of our delegation. And I have to think about seniority versus who's represented the city the longest, but it is always, as I've known, to request that senators be given an opportunity to speak first. And Senator Sutterline, you missed some of my comments earlier, unless you were watching online. I shared that it is my hope with the number of decreased localities that you'll be representing, that you'll be able to make Roanoke City more of a priority so that we can focus on our shared values moving forward. And we look forward to working with you in this session and invite your feedback on our program, but also to know what items you might be seeking this year that we could support.
All right, wonderful. It's great to be with you all today. I'm excited about getting to represent the city come the second Wednesday in January, noon then. I also appreciate that we have a recent Senate LA that has such good thoughts on how things should operate. So a few different things. I will be heading out shortly to the Education Summit that Senator Lucas has arranged in Richmond. It's a lengthy packet this year. I always do believe it would be best to have a shorter packet. And I remember a few years ago we were able to, out of this meeting came the request for the labs, which we were able to secure the funding for. So I didn't see something along those lines this time. If there is something like that that percolates between now and 5 o'clock on Friday following the second Wednesday, please let us know. I don't care how late you let me know that, but I'd like to know it as soon as possible, because we were able to make a lot of progress very quickly on getting the funding for the labs a few years ago. A few of the things, it won't surprise you that I don't think the requiring a permit for firearm ownership is a good idea. I don't think it's something that's likely going to become law during this General Assembly either. Senator Edwards was chaired the Judiciary Committee for 4 years, the entirety of the time it's been called the Judiciary Committee, actually. And if something did not pass during that time, especially during the 2 years of complete United Democratic government related to firearms, I don't expect it's going to be something that Governor Youngkin's able to find agreement with if Senate Judiciary wasn't able to find an agreement with it there. A few of the things on here on Catawba, Delegate Rasul, Delegate McNamara, and I all share a similar view on that and are optimistic we can continue moving the ball on that. We need to continue helping some of our friends further away. That was how we were able to maintain Catawba to begin with. When the McAuliffe administration wanted to close it, we were able to help our friends that live much further away recognize what would happen and how catastrophic it would be to the western half of the state. On the constitutional amendments on here, I don't expect that we're going to take those up this year. It wouldn't make a lot of sense, and usually both Democratic and Republican leadership like to wait to the year before or year of a House of Delegates election to roll it in that way. But if the amendment we're dealing with legal recognition of same-sex unions comes up again, I plan to vote the same way I always have, which is in the affirmative. Some of the issues that I'll be working on this year are taxes. I'm optimistic that I don't think consensus is going to be achieved early in this General Assembly on taxes. I think there will be a fair bit of posturing early on, but I'm hopeful that by the time we get to late February and early March, we're able to make progress. And I think Delegate McNamara will probably make some comments on it. But what I generally want to do is reduce the cost of living taxes that hit that are most regressive and hit working families the hardest. So a few years ago, we were able to get rid of the state grocery tax. I think we should also be able to get rid of the local grocery tax. I think Delegate McNamara came up with a great model of how we could do that. He and I both introduced the legislation to that effect. There was not enthusiasm for agreement of much of anything at the end of the last session, largely going into the elections. So I think that was one of the unfortunate consequences. I'm hopeful that this year, again, not at the beginning, but perhaps at the end, we're able to make some progress on that. I also think it's incredibly important that we enhance the standard deduction. Every time that inflation raises folks' take-home pay, but it does actually increase their value of that pay, they end up getting taxed more by the state government because of the rate nature of our income taxes. But at the same time, unless we raise the set dollar amount of standard deduction, we don't receive that benefit. And there's also regarding public education, that's something I'm most excited about, getting to represent the city. You know, I've been here, I think every year I've been in office, even though I've never got to represent a citizen in Roanoke City until this next January. But I've really appreciated the new burst of energy in Roanoke City schools, throughout the schools, especially that's been brought on by several of the new leaders, the superintendent, Mr. Siebert, several of the other folks that they've brought in senior positions and in schools across the way. I recognize how important LCI is. You've always heard me talk about that before. I worry, talking about some of the education funding formulas, what might happen to our region, and by our region, I mean not just the Roanoke Valley, but 2-3 counties removed from us as well. Roanoke City definitely benefits from the LCI as it's currently constituted, but then we also benefit from the at-risk add-ons. And so how we go about doing that, I just think we need to be very careful going forward. And so that will be my general policy regarding education funding. I hear folks in Northern Virginia and Greater Richmond talking about wanting to fundamentally change education funding formulas that I think would hurt kids in Roanoke City, kids in Floyd County, kids in Salem, Montgomery, Roanoke County, a lot of places near us. So we just got to be very careful about that. And that's just something I'd urge you in your roles as political leaders, outside of simply being on council, but just as you talk to other members or other political figures from other parts of the state, just to be cautious about that, because we have a lot to lose on education funding. Again, I just want to echo how excited I am about our schools and what's happening there. Very excited to see what comes out of the work group, hopefully in the next week, trying to get more work-based education opportunities for our English language learners. I think it's incredibly important that we help these young people be in the best spot they can in their late teens, early 20s, mid-20s, because a lot of them are coming in very difficult situations, but we should hope that by the time they're in their years of family formation, that they're in a great place economically so that we can do that. And I think a lot of that starts immediately out of the gate when they are leaving our high school. And so it looks like different things for different folks, but I really appreciate our superintendent's office working on that, and our school board. Also, something that's not in here, but that I've echoed in my conversations with the school board, I think that in your conversations with other political leaders across the Commonwealth, you should remind them that you 7 appoint a school board here in Roanoke City that has done well, and that you've got good qualified people on that school board, and that the appointed school board model has worked well both here in Roanoke City and in Salem. On election day, when a lot of our focus was on legislative races on this side of the Commonwealth, in Greater Richmond, they almost had as much attention to a referendum in Hanover County about school boards. And that school board referendum failed, meaning that they're going to maintain an appointed school board. So one of my concerns would be an effort to pass a general law that would change everyone to an elected school board. So I don't know for certain that that's going to happen, but if you hear or see things like that, I think it's really important that you talk with some of your other friends and political colleagues from other parts of the Commonwealth that, hey, that's not just about Hanover County, that's about Roanoke City Schools. And you also throw out that's about Salem City Schools too. So I think it's important that we go that way. I understand everyone likes everything to be elected sometimes. I don't think the water board should be elected. I don't think the jail board should be elected. And I think that the school board not being elected has given a better leadership for our schools than we might have otherwise here in the city and also in Salem. So does anyone have any questions for me?
I would ask, just in the interest of time, if it would be possible if we could hear from all the legislators and let the members of this committee ask collectively, so that unless you can stay to 10 a.m.
Well, I got one quick question for business.
Yes, Mayor Lee.
Senator, are you supportive of the measures we asked for in addressing gun violence?
On point, which page specifically would you like to address?
It's number
I think
4.
it comes in a few different pages here.
I'm just looking at legislative priorities.
On the very first page, legislative priorities, number 4 is where most of those are housed. And some of them are...
We've got 3 packets. So the first page...
Yeah, especially on the...
that's my second page of my packet.
Sorry.
Item 4, I know we've been talking for years about an increase in House Bill 599 funding for our local police department. And overall, gun violence is very critical for us in terms of addressing it. So I just wanted to, I didn't seem to hear you say a lot, or you support that, or what's your position on that?
On 599 funding, I think most every member of the General Assembly is supportive of 599 funding. I don't know if I'll be on Senate Finance. So, I mean, honestly, right now, anyone that doesn't know their committee assignments on any funding issue can very easily say, yeah, I'm for it. I'm for it. I voted for, on budgetary issues, I'm very fiscally conservative, as you're aware, but I've been able to work with the last 2 budgets that originated out of Senator Edwards' votes and my votes on the budget matched, even though we come from different places. So I'm happy to work collaboratively for that. But again, there's a good chance I won't find out until 1 o'clock on the second Wednesday in January what committee I'm on. So if I'm on there, I'll be able to have much more of an impact on that. That's something I'd encourage you to especially talk with Delegate Rasul about, as I'm most confident that he will be on appropriations again. And it would be a terrible error for it not to be the case.
Thank you. We'll move into, well, we've got more comments. Yeah, it is my interest to try and keep this meeting to 10 as close as possible. Go ahead, Councilman Volson.
I just had two quick questions for you.
Sure.
One, now that you are representing the city, are you going to be supportive of our charter changes that ask for our election to move to November?
No. I don't think that moving it to November is a good idea. I think that what you're going to find in the 2024 council elections, moving it to a presidential November is basically an invitation for hyperpartisanship. If we are going to move them to November, I think that there ought to be some sort of balance. I mean, I think it's not good that in a city of 100,000 people, every election is at large, and that there's neighborhoods in the city that have never had anyone on city council the entire time they've been in the city. I don't think that's good. So if it were coupled with a ward model, I would think that would be great. I understand all 7 members of council currently got elected in the current system of city at large, and think that's great. But I don't think that it's reflective of the city. As I talked about last time, one of the members of council brought up, what about Floyd County? And I pointed out that Floyd County has gone Republican for president every 4 years since 1912, when Teddy Roosevelt ran as an independent and they voted for him. And they still have a 3-2 council, or 3-2 board, because they go and they're elected by magisterial districts. Roanoke County, which is a 5-0 Republican board, that's still elected by magisterial districts. I think by forcing it into a federal November at-large city election, we're basically saying it's really important to vote in that nomination process, and good luck in November. I don't think that it's a good model, and I don't think it's something that you see being emulated in other parts of Virginia. Chesapeake, which pushed so hard for the senator from Chesapeake that pushed so hard for this, they also had a district system too. I don't think there are not many places as big as here that say everyone needs to be elected city at large. And now when you're going to be running in a presidential year at large, it's going to be an incredibly expensive election. So it shouldn't surprise you that my position is the same.
The other second question, Councilman Volson.
Yeah, the other question was on the, you spoke about removing the local grocery tax. In doing that, will the state be looking at a way to replace the funds that would not be coming in from a local grocery tax?
Yeah, you can look at my bill and Delegate McNamara's bills from last year. I can't recall the numbers because they repeat every 2 years, but they were early numbers.
Thank you. Councilwoman White-Boyd.
Yeah, just to follow up, Mr. Suderline, on the charter change. It is the law. We vote in November. This would just be a matter of housekeeping, and it was done for so many other localities. I wonder why you would object to Roanoke City. It's just a matter of housekeeping.
The reason it was done across the board was because the senator from Chesapeake, Senator Spruill, sought a general law because he could not get a charter change for Chesapeake. So he did it through general law. If the general law were to revert, everyone else would get to decide where it is. So you currently get to have your November election because it's the general law. But if it were to go, and this is going to be a little more complicated than people want to hear probably, but if it were to go back to letting cities decide, then there would actually have to be an affirmative act to take a city council that had been elected in November to ask to go back to May, and then ask the General Assembly to change it with supermajorities in both chambers.
But you're saying if, but right now that is the law, and we vote in November, and I think as a courtesy to this city, you would recommend a charter change just like the rest of the cities.
No, that you already have as a practical effect your November election.
So then what's the problem with putting it into the charter?
I think Councilman Pretty's were you about to say something?
I was going to try and keep order of this committee. But, I would reflect.
I would suggest we've got a lot of
understand-
challenges in this city, and this is something that you and I have a difference of opinion on, And you should be happy that your current opinion, or your opinion is the current law, and maybe we should look at several of the other issues that will actually be coming before the General Assembly.
Thank you, and that is why this was moved into our general policy statement. It's something that we will continue to support every year rather than one of our legislative priorities. And I hope that we're able to have conversations on this and other issues going forward about where we can gain your support, where you might be able to gain our support, but namely, we're going to need your help. You know, you served in leadership positions as this governor's transitioned into place, and while we have a legislature that is of one party, we still have an administration of another, and we're going to need to rely on each other in order to get our shared needs done.
Yes, I think public education is where we have a great opportunity to work together. So thank you all.
Thank you. Delegate McNamara is the other legislators who's here, and thank you so graciously for waiting so long.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning to you all. It's going to be a fantastic opportunity for me to represent citizens of Roanoke City come about a month from now. I'm certainly excited to do that. Spent an awful lot of time in the 3 precincts I'll be representing with my staff and working. Speaking of staff, if you don't know Reagan Owens, she's worked with me last year. She knows a lot of the legislature and just got engaged yesterday or 2 days ago. So congratulations to her. So I think Roanoke City, from a very high level perspective, I think you're certainly well blessed with. I have not met the new chief of police, but I look forward to it. And I understand he comes with fantastic credentials. Your school system, the leadership, as well as the boots on the ground, is certainly to be commended, as well as the city council and the work you all do. When we look at a few things. I think you're one of the things I would like to reemphasize again is there's a pretty influential Chesterfield legislator that is very involved with the Education Committee in the House and is embarking and wants to change how we do funding on the school funding formulas. And Senator Suderline, I think he already left. No, he's still here. He mentioned that. I don't know how to emphasize that more clearly. I could go through the actual, just get down to very deep levels on how that funding formula works. It's not well understood, and the fact it's not well understood is why we've been very successful in keeping it, and I'm very, very cautious, and I don't believe we're ever going to be benefited by trying to mess with the school funding formula. So I know we try to do things as an add-on, which is good. I still get very, very nervous every time we open that can of that funding formula. And one of these days, people are going to figure it out. And if I'm in Fairfax County, I don't have 22 or 20 kids in a class. I have 35 in a class, and I'm getting funded 20% by the state versus some of the areas we have getting funded as high as 80% in the state. So it's a big deal. Won't go into that. As far as we want more money for education funding. Of course, we want more money. We've done very well in the General Assembly. Last year was a 22% increase year over year on K through 12. And again, some of that was one time to address learning loss, but still is very, very, certainly there's an emphasis when we talk about things we can be successful at: education, mental health, logical police reforms, I think, or logical criminal justice reforms, I think, are things that are going to be those type of activities that we're going to see some success in the General Assembly. And again, you have a super asset in Delegate Rasool, particularly from the mental health perspective. He's very, very knowledgeable, works very hard, and has done a wonderful job of trying to create support across the board in that area. Affordable housing. I get a little bit concerned with the increasing government overreach on blighted and derelict properties. A lot of that came through a committee I served in over the years. I think and there's been some successes that have been offered, and I think you'll probably continue to see that as a changed General Assembly, probably more likely to have those type of changes coming through. And again, it's probably something that's not going to get it'll come through probably somewhat bipartisan, and I wouldn't think it would would be opposed by the administration. One thing I will add on affordable housing, you asked some of the things that I hope to be doing. Again, I'm going to do most of what I do in the tax world, and in the tax world, you know, Democrats and Republicans can agree. We want to be efficient, we want to be effective, and we don't want people, I currently represent, I think, the third poorest county in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and I'm very much of the opinion that the regressive taxes I'm not in favor of, and while I did carry some bills to lower the top-end tax rate, that was because it was part of a package, and that was kind of a direction that I was told to walk in. But the grocery tax, as it was designed, I think would have passed a couple years ago if it wasn't opposed by VML. And it was a well-designed bill that not only would reimburse, not a car tax reimbursement, but a reimbursement that changes with inflation, changes with the price level, changes with the purchase going forward. And that is a much more stable, it benefits, in my opinion, the entire county. It is the single most regressive tax we have in our tax code. So if we really care about our lowest income people and being able to put food on their table, there's no reason the VML should have been opposing that bill. And they were spreading a lot of misinformation on this is going to be a temporary and it's not going to be in perpetuity. Well, it's pretty hard once that's in code, it's pretty hard for someone to go back and say, guess what, we're going to take it away. And I think that bill will come forward. By the way, it got 98 to 1 in the House eventually, but it failed in the Senate, and the VML was not helpful. From an affordable housing standpoint, I think you're going to continue to see an emphasis by the last two administrations. There's been pretty good progress when you look at some of the tax benefits that exist now versus 6 years ago when I went into the General Assembly from an affordable housing perspective. I'm going to also put in a bill that is not one you think of as an affordable housing bill, but currently sales and use tax accrues on the first 90 days that somebody's staying in a hotel. If you are in danger of losing housing, oftentimes your extended stay hotels become your home. It is kind of the very last level before you end up being homeless. And to charge sales and use tax on somebody that's staying in that type of facility for 30 or 60 days, in my opinion, is wrong. So I'm going to have a bill that reduces that from 90 days to 30 days. That also is in concert with the transient occupancy tax, which is on a 30-day basis. So I'll say that on affordable housing. When we look at other types of, there's a couple, from a taxing perspective, there will be a bill in which I think it certainly has support on both sides of the House and the Senate. There will be a bill to keep the elevated standard deduction, which again is about 87% of the population, and it's the lower 87% of the population, generally speaking, that are using the standard deduction when they file their taxes. So that bill, not well known, has a sunset a couple years out, and so there'll be a bill in this year, which I hope will get supported, that will make that permanent. Now, I'd like to increase it, but my first goal is to make what we have now permanent, and that bill will be in there. Elected school boards, I don't want to hit on that, especially for folks that were in the education. I'm not going to touch on a lot of education because we already went over a lot of that in the past, but people that were at that meeting, elected, that was an 88 to 11 vote, in the House. I can't remember what the vote was in the Senate, but Senator, it's not politically popular to be supporting the appointed school boards. I feel very strongly. Delegate Rasul and myself were 2 out of those 11 votes. And in the Senate, quite frankly, Senator Suderline was the key person that killed that bill, and he did it by lining up a bunch of his senators that he had that didn't have a dog. They didn't have any skin in the game. They didn't, their school boards were all elected already, and he said, help me out. for Roanoke City, even though he didn't represent Roanoke City at the time in Salem. Be glad to answer any questions, but I think I think you're in very good position from your representative and understanding of how the legislative process works, and I think we'll do the best we can for you.
Delegate McNamara, if I may request, are you able to stick around for a few minutes so that we could take other comments from representatives here so
Sure.
we can get through?
Sure.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. I recognize.
By 11 I have to leave because I'll be.
We have plenty of other business to do
I have
as
soup
well.
to sell.
Thank you. And I'll recognize, Joyce Watkins was here today, and I hope to give her an opportunity to speak, but she was very clear with me before that she had a hardline hour and needed to go. And Dr. Siebert, I'll extend you the same courtesy as you need to drive across the state. So they've had an opportunity to talk with you unless anyone has burning questions on education. I don't feel a need to.
I just wanted to say thank you, and just really appreciates the collaboration we enjoy.
Thank you, Dr. Siebert. With that, yes. Well, with that, we'll move into always the Senate first. We'll Senate in seniority, although Senator Edwards could not be here today. He has to chair the Code Commission. I believe it might be his last meeting, and they're dealing with a topic important to us here today, the lovely issue of public notices that Patrick and I enjoy so much. But thank you for coming to represent him today. I think he'll also be at the summit, and we're happy to hear what any of his feedback is.
Yeah, morning, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, Chairman Priddy. Want to thank you for inviting me to speak. As you mentioned, Senator Edwards is at the Code Commission, which he has chaired since 2010 and been vice chair of since 2006. So that's been a long piece of his service, the great and powerful Code Commission that he likes to talk about. So I do want to congratulate you on this very concise legislative priorities package that you have. I think this sets you up well to work with your legislators to find some way to advance these priorities. Obviously, some of these have been addressed a variety of ways in different bills that we've seen over the years. So as the session moves forward, we'll see how these develop. So regret that Senator Edwards couldn't be here, but I did want to say he was impressed by the presentation made at this council's last meeting of the Key to the City. That was very nice, and I think that was a very appropriate final meeting to have as his final meeting as your incumbent state senator. So thank you all for that lovely time we had at that last meeting. Did want to speak very briefly about a few of these priorities. Number one, we mentioned requiring a permit to purchase firearms and ammunition. I do think that that's something that's worth investigating. We obviously have a real issue with gun violence in this city. And I will say, when we had unified Democratic control in Richmond, we only had 1 year of that before COVID hit and really put the brakes on a lot of things. So I think that there is reason to be encouraged. There are a lot of good ideas that are still worth investigating that can still be legislated on as we go forward. In this now our third year of divided government, hopefully we can see some of these priorities advanced. And then we also talked about mandatory minimums and the idea of ensuring accountability. I just wanted to encourage you all that when we talk about accountability, it's important to remember that it's our judges, right, who are in a position to ensure accountability when there are crimes, and also to ensure that there is not injustice, right. And Senator Edwards has always been very critical of mandatory minimums because they tie the hands of our judges. And in situations where a judge might see that imposing a certain penalty would be an injustice, that they're prohibited by law from taking what they see as an appropriate action. So it's just really important to remember that the legislators who represent us also have that role in selecting our judges. And so it's just important to keep that front of mind as we go forward. As we may have vacancies, that our legislators have a very important decision to make, and that they need to hear from you about what would be the appropriate decisions. Obviously, a lot of the rest of this sort of depends on resources, and we'll see how a lot of that goes. I know from working with senators for a couple of years now that, in particular, when we talk about the state funding formula for our schools, there's always a lot of hesitation to crack that open. And with the JLARC report that we just saw, and with the focus on education these last couple of years, this might be a year where that does see some major work. And so keeping everyone's eyes on that, being very focused on that could be important, because if there are changes to be made this year, they may persist for many years. And so if that were to go in a bad way for the city, it might be a little while before we would be able to take corrective action. So I think it's very appropriate that that be a very high priority for you all. And then also, I'll say on the public safety issues, and I'll say, I think it's great that our new chief of police, who's obviously been here a very short time, thank you to him and to his command staff for putting together some very thoughtful suggestions. One thing I can say is that the issue of the Glock sears, auto sear devices, I know that last week in Richmond, Senator Edwards chaired his final meeting of the Crime Commission, and they had a presentation from the chief of police in Richmond where he talked about these devices and how harmful they are, and had a video demonstrating what they do. And I think there was a lot of attention paid at that meeting to this issue, which is relatively new. I had not heard of these devices before in the several years that Senator Edwards has been chair of Judiciary and in the Crime Commission. So as I said, a relatively short period where we had full control, we were able to do some of these things, and there are always new things cropping up. So this is something that I think has the attention of some of these bodies like the Crime Commission to look at ways to do something going forward. So glad to see that our chief of police has this as a priority as well.
If you had more, or
I'm all
move
set.
things along. Well, thank you, Mr. DiLorenzo, being here for
Thank you.
Senator Edwards today. Please express our wishes to him and extend an invitation to him as we continue on these topics, despite his tenure and his retirement, as we continue to work on legislative items, including ones that may not be adopted today, that we welcome his input and our legislators' input more than just a presentation at the end of the year, but rather throughout the development, so we come to something together that we can all agree on without being so politicized one way or another. With that, we have Elena Corfield here from Delegate Rasul's office to give her a moment to share some items from Delegate Rasul.
Well, good morning. I don't have many things on the agenda that Patrick did not already speak on, so I'll be pretty brief, especially in the interest of everyone's time. So thank you for once again prioritizing Catawba Hospital. This is a project that's very near and dear to our office, and we're hoping to continue pushing for that. We are still trying to find the best avenue for the upcoming session on how we want to fully approach that, but we do intend to continue fighting for those advancements for the hospital. Public safety, of course, in the city has been a huge priority, so we're going to do what we can there to really find some solutions and work with our colleagues. Richmond faces that as well, so I'm sure they have some insight. Those legislators can help give us some advice as we move forward on that. Education, of course, we've been very involved. We've been on the education committee for about 5 years now. We work very closely with the schools every year, and we look forward to helping them expand their technical education programs, make sure their teachers are getting paid what they deserve, making sure they get all the resources, and of course some school construction, as a lot of our schools are getting to a ripe old age here pretty soon. Those buildings are in need of a little help, and we'll work to get some more funding there. As you know, previously we were on appropriations. That was a great way for us to give some voice to the city. We're hoping that continues. We won't know obviously for a little bit longer, but we're hoping that we can stick around there. Let's see, missing anything here? Yeah, affordable housing, that was the last one I wanted to say something on. So with affordable housing, obviously rent has skyrocketed, especially even since I've moved home, and that was only about 2 years ago. I came back into Roanoke, and rent very much has gone up. It's causing an increase in homelessness, and obviously young people are having a harder time moving into the city as a result. So we're looking to find ways that we can, either with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund or new programs, that we might be able to expand on those funds to really get some affordable housing opportunities here in the city. Any questions? I know Patrick covered a lot of similar priorities that we have, so I don't want to open up too much for you.
Yes, Mayor Lee.
Real quick, that Delegate Rasul, and I'm sure he's aware of it, that our number one priority this year is public safety, community safety. And that's something that I'm hoping that'll carry on in Richmond. I got a feeling that it may, because many of these legislators up there from urban areas that are experiencing the same kinds of issues we are. And so things like the 599, which you've heard before, I hope Delegate Rasul will stand up for that, and along with the funding, requiring is something that we sort of went over, we talked about requiring safe storage in a residence where a minor is present, these guns. And this is a concern that I have, and I think colleagues may, but I think that's important. And I'm hoping that we'll hear a lot from him on that as we go forward. It's a concern of mine, especially.
Yes, sir. And we are very much in favor of safe storage, and we are looking into the HB 599 funding as we got the packet earlier. So we've gotten ahead of a little bit of this research. So we're certainly going to be prioritizing public safety to the best of our ability, depending on, especially with committee assignments. We've previously been on public safety. If that were to change, we'll definitely speak with our colleagues about what we would like to see happen there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from other members for anyone of our delegation with a reminder on the amount of time that we have?
And if anyone has follow-up questions or comments, you can definitely reach out to our office on those.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
With that, before we move into adoption or amendment of this program, we do have a public comment, and I want to ask our secretary, how many people have signed up? Just the one, as always. Ms. Dirk, thank you for coming. Public comment is something that I added into all of our legislative committee meetings to give the public an opportunity to provide feedback throughout the program and prior to our full adoption. Ms. Dirk is our most studious member of the public who has taken this opportunity at almost every time, normally focusing on cycling requests. I will ask if you could try and keep your remarks brief.
I will be very brief. And I am Barbara Dirk. I am bicycle partisan, and I believe in healthy communities and a healthy Commonwealth. I believe that you need three things to ride a bicycle. You need a bike, you need safe infrastructure, and you need a good haircut. That I ask, bicycling is bike partisan. The last person in this area that carried bike legislation was Greg Habib. Delegate Sam Rizal has co-patroned before, and he has submitted the Virginia Bicycling Federation omnibus bill to legislative services for drafting. So I appreciate that. That the VBF bicycle bills are included in the Virginia Conservation Network package, so I would encourage you to support VCN, that we in transportation are affected by bicycling, mental health, physical health, motorist convenience, public safety, and a reliable workforce are all impacted by these bills. So I encourage you to ask our legislators to support bicycling. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Dirk. No other members of the public? We will now move into any comments from committee members before we make amendments and adopt this program. Okay. All right. Well, I had heard from a number of you on other requests, and you'd be amazed. This is what all this other paper, this is all the other research I've done based on what I've had from other conversations from Ms. Sturk and otherwise. But I think it's important to say that everything that's included in here just shows how much work we have to do on an ongoing basis and what can be done at a later date. Ms. Sturk, I thank you for your request as it relates to the safety stop, treating them as a yield, and as you've mentioned, advocacy relating to allow members to ride two abreast, cycling next to each other. That is a section of code that was adopted into law, and the General Assembly sought to move back last year, although with a caveat on how it can be civilly enforced. With that, I hope you'll be okay. We added an item to our policy statement supporting pedestrian and cycling safety generally. If you have a request that we don't take any position on a safety stop at this time, but allow us to have a conversation amongst that so that we can get maybe a full presentation from you on that item. So whatever item we support isn't something that might become law or might go back and forth one way, but we will continue to support cycling generally. I've also gotten a request from another committee member as it relates to inclusionary zoning and have pages on that, but I think that topic itself is dense enough that for a later point in time and maybe a future legislative agenda. And another one relates to E911 operators, but that is a broader request because we would have to change how we do our retirement system generally for the city of Roanoke. But it's part of a broader conversation that can and should be had. And again, I have tons of pages to review and talk about. So it would be my request at this time that if I could get a motion on an amendment to amend the legislative priorities to include Chief Booth's request, but tabling item C to a later point in time.
So moved.
There's a motion
Second.
and a second. Is there any discussion?
I would still like to see C stay in. I don't think, based on the comments that were given with regards to the opposing the elimination and the mandatory minimums, and hearing from the senator with regards to that, I think this should still stay, since it's still a broad overview of that. I would be comfortable with it staying in and not opposing it.
Thank you, Councilmember Moon Reynolds. I will note that by not including C on the agenda at this time, that should not be construed as support or opposition of that particular request, but just an opportunity for this committee to hear both from the chief himself and maybe some other individuals on the public before we take a full position on it. Any other comments or questions? Okay, I will ask the clerk to call the roll on that amendment.
Mayor Lee,
Aye.
Mr. Cobb,
Aye.
Mr. Pretty,
Aye.
Ms. Moon Reynolds,
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez Jones, Mr. Volleson,
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd, Joyce Watkins.
Present.
Motion passes.
And the motion passes. The legislative priorities are amended to include all of the chief's requests with tabling item C to a later date. Do we have a motion to recommend the program to council as amended?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Are there any remarks from committee? There'll be time this afternoon to make remarks before council adopts it. I just want to say thank you to our legislators being present. We look forward to working together on the items that we share within this agenda to see where we might be able to move you on some items that we may not agree on, and maybe vice versa. But it's important that we continue to recognize that, campaigning is over, that we have to work together in order to get any movement forward. And regardless of who controls the legislature, we still have a divided government in Richmond. Further comments?
You're one in the country.
I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Mayor Lee. Mayor Lee,
I'm not sure why
Yes,
you're...
I'm sorry, I didn't.
To adopt the program as amended, but we're calling the roll on this.
Mr. Cobb,
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Pretty,
Aye.
Ms. Moon Reynolds,
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Volleson,
Aye.
Ms. White Boyd, Natasha Saunders, Joyce Watkins.
And the motion passes. This will be recommended to council and will be on the 2 p.m. agenda as amended. Thank you to everyone on this committee. Our work is never over, but hopefully we can take a short respite. And after the budget comes out on December 20th from the governor, there'll be more items that you should hear from me on what our priorities are. This program is very budget heavy. It focuses on the number of responsibilities that we have in the city of Roanoke with the limited resources that we do, and we look forward to working with you, Delegate McNamara. With that, any other business?
Nope.
We are adjourned at 10:22. Sorry for going over so long. Thanks for bearing with us. Mayor Lee, the floor is yours again.
All right, thank you. We're going to take a 5-minute recess and come back and meet with the Airport Commission. Meeting with the Airport Commission.
Mr. Mayor, I believe there's a quorum present in the room, but I believe the member is occupied with the meeting at the moment.
Well, we're not going to talk till we get a quorum anyway. Good morning, everybody, and glad to welcome you all. We in our legislative meeting, and you're talking politics. Things seem to go a little longer than you want them to, but welcome. We apologize for the delay that we have. I'm going to ask our clerk to call the roll again for council.
Okay, I will. Ms. White Boyd?
Here.
Mr. Volleson?
Here.
Ms. Moon Reynolds?
Here.
Ms. Sanchez Jones?
Here.
Mr. Pretty?
Here.
Vice Mayor Cobb? And Mayor Lee.
Here, and a quorum is present. And I'm going to ask the Secretary of the Airport Commission to call the roll.
Yes. Chairman Bishop? Here. Vice Chairman Freeland? Here. Mr. Howard? Here. Mr. Goodrich? Here. We have three absent.
All right, thank you. Again, it's good to see you all here. I'm delighted to be here, to hear you all, and I know we've been talking, well, some of us have been talking back and forth about the airport, which is a major concern with us. And so I'm going to ask the chairman, Dr. Bishop, if he would go ahead and lead us through this session. But welcome everybody, and thank you all for what you do, and we're anxious to get and talk about the Airport Commission. Where we go?
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate the opportunity to be able to come before you this morning and to give you an update. We're really pleased with the things that have been taking place with the capital plan. And I'm sure our executive director, we are all pleased with the work that he has done and is doing on behalf of all of us at the airport. And so, in respect of time, we'll just turn to him and
Thank you.
We'll turn the mic on.
Yes, sir, Dr. Bush. Just turn that mic on there.
But he can go ahead and use the podium up there. Good morning.
Pleasure to be with you again, and we'll step through a few things that I understand were of interest to you, and be happy to answer any questions that you may have at the end of the day. But always want to start off with just a reminder to everybody on the value of the airport to the region. And this is from a study that the Virginia Department of Aviation did back, they actually did it in 2018, but it's using 2016 data. But if you look at it, the airports in Virginia, the commercial airports in Virginia, contributed $21.8 billion in economic activity in 2016, 140,000 half jobs, $7.4 billion in annual payroll. And of that, Roanoke Blacksburg back in 2016 was about $250 million. And we expect that would be a little higher now, but the state will probably do an update on this next year, maybe 2025. They don't do them every year, but with the pandemic and everything else, we would expect them to do an update here in the next couple of years. But just a reminder of kind of what the value of the airport is. Talk a little bit about the air service. We've currently got nonstop service by Allegiant Air to Sanford, Orlando, Florida, and St. Petersburg, Florida. We've got American Airlines to Charlotte, anywhere from 7 to 10 flights a day, depending on the time of year and what they've got going. They've also got service to Philadelphia twice a day, most days of the week, and New York City to LaGuardia. Delta Airlines has got Atlanta 3 times a day. They're looking to go to 4 as soon as we can substantiate the loads and make it worth their while. They also fly New York, LaGuardia. And then United Airlines is doing very well with 3 a day to Chicago O'Hare and 3 a day to Washington Dulles. And as the international markets continue to grow back, those flights are doing very well. So we've got a total of 8 nonstop destinations. That's the same as what we had back in 2019. It's also the same as what we had last year, with the exception, as you all remember, we had seasonal Nashville service for a period of time last year. Well, we've got about 1,264 seats now, even though we've got a few less flights. So we're actually bigger airplanes, 68 average seats per day or per aircraft versus 59 back in 2019. So we're on the positive side of the ledger everywhere except the number of flights compared to 2019. So really it's that Nashville flight that we're missing, and a little bit of Charlotte service that they've come and gone with a little bit as that hub has grown back. Nearly 300,000 total passengers in 2022. That was somewhere around 298 is where we ended up the year in 22. Slightly below 2019 numbers, but 23% better than 2021. And this year through August, we're trending about 16% higher than that over those 2022 numbers. Right now, through August, 327,000 total passengers, 418,000 available seats for a 78% load factor. That's a pretty good, strong load factor in anybody's market. And actually, it's a little bit telling in that Nashville ran about 50%, Philadelphia runs about 60%, LaGuardia is running about 50% for each airline. So it really tells you how strong that Dulles, Charlotte, and Chicago flights really are. They're all above 80%. And then the Allegiant service to Florida consistently stays above 85%. And we ought to be really happy, because for a community our size, we really have great air service out of here. Very few places can say they've got 4 carriers and serve the number of major hubs that we've got. But it doesn't get there on the population of Roanoke and the immediate area here. You've got to look at our catchment area. And we define that as anything within about 2 hours of the Roanoke Airport. So if you look at that, now you're talking about 1.5 million people. That gets airlines' attention, and that's what we're out selling all the time. Is it's not just about the 100 or 300,000 in the immediate area. It's about going bigger than that. And actually, when you've got low fares and great service, you can pull them from further outside of that. But for a general catchment area, 2 hours is a pretty good barometer. And just a little bit of a heat map just to show you what you would expect. Most of our passengers come from the Roanoke County, Salem area, but there's a dark red dot that's called Virginia Tech and Blacksburg. So that's where most of our traffic comes from. But you also see a tremendous amount over around Lynchburg. They carry about 10 or 12% of the traffic out of this region. They are in our catchment area, but they typically just carry what they've got there close to town, as you would expect. And we pull them from as far away as Harrisonburg and even Virginia. You even see a few light orange spots down around Greensboro. So it just depends on where the fares are and where somebody wants to go. Story of the day, it is kind of what it's been for quite a while, but about 48% of the total domestic passengers in this 1.5 million passenger catchment area fly ROA. About 42% of those fly ROA when we do not have a nonstop flight. Where we really show that we are tired of driving is when we have a nonstop flight, we're getting 72% of that traffic. So that's what our push is with the airlines. We want to have nonstop service. We don't want to pay too much, and we're constantly out there selling that to them. Talking about the top markets that we have out of this region, Orlando is number 1 by a pretty good stretch. About 113 people a day fly between here and Orlando. As you know, we've got the Allegiant service to Sanford, but there's still out of 82,000 total market size, we've got, which means 82,000 people flew between here and Orlando back in 2023 first quarter. 33,000 of them flew from somewhere else. So they drove to Charlotte. They drove somewhere to catch another flight. Most of them going to MCO versus Sanford. New York LaGuardia, we've got good service there. Obviously, the New York market's number 2 there. And then you've got Chicago, which is a good, strong market. And then the first one that we don't have service to that we're out trying to sell to some of the ultra low-cost carriers is South Florida. We don't have anything down in that area. Fort Lauderdale is the strongest out of the 3, but really anything, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach, Fort Myers, we'll take anything if we can get an airline to fly it. So we're out talking to Allegiant. We're always talking to Breeze, talking to anybody that's got service down to that area to see if we can't get that market covered. Tampa, we've got the service to Petersburg, but again, we've still got about another 15,000 that are driving somewhere else to go to Tampa. or flying through Atlanta or Charlotte to get to TPA. Boston, we've got a really strong market there. About 61 people a day fly back and forth to Boston. Most of them today are driving somewhere else, about 28,000 out of the 44,000 total in the market. Boston is just a really tough place to get service to. It is full. It's kind of like Fort Lauderdale. There's no gates. Everybody's got an airplane that can fly there. Has more than 61 people that want to go every day, so it's just a really tough market to get into. So we are constantly talking to airlines about, well, what about maybe going to Providence or Manchester, get us somewhere close to it. Right now, the challenge there is kind of like everything else up here. It's the lack of pilots, lack of airplanes, and just trying to put them where they make the most money for them. And then you go on down the list, Atlanta's obviously there, and as I said, Delta's got 3 flights a day to Atlanta, and they're looking to actually go to 4 as soon as we can increase those load factors just a little bit more. And then you start getting into places like Dallas-Fort Worth. Dallas has got 59 people a day that fly back and forth there right now. Those are not big enough numbers to get an airline to get excited about putting a multi-million-dollar asset into that market. So I'm going to show you in a few minutes kind of the argument that we make to make that a justifiable market. Los Angeles, the entire basin out there. Denver, another strong market. Las Vegas, San Francisco Bay. We've got Nashville up there just to kind of show you where it was. About 51% of the market there is leaking. Even when we had the twice-a-week Nashville service, those numbers stayed about the same. So just a different way of showing you the largest markets without nonstop service out of ROA, and that gives you the same order: South Florida, Boston, Dallas-Fort Worth, LA. But the way we go out and sell it is kind of looking at this. While we only had those 60 or so people a day going directly to Dallas, if you look at where they can connect behind Dallas, now you're talking about nearly 600 people a day. That's what we're selling to American Airlines. It doesn't work with anybody else because you need the power of that hub behind it. And you've got a similar story with Denver, and that's got to be united to make it work. But that would get us the West Coast. We're talking to both of those carriers. Both of them are telling us we're on the list. We got a little frustrated late last week when American added another Greensboro and Raleigh nonstop. They've already got nonstop to Dallas. They tell us they're trying to rebuild those markets and build back the proven markets before they start newer markets. But I think part of our challenge has always been here that they charge high fares. They fly nonstop out of a lot of places close to us. And I think as long as we are kind of paying those high fares and continuing to drive, we're probably going to have a hard time convincing them that they need to move us up on the priority list. But that's the argument we're out there making every day, is that we're tired of driving, tired of paying too much. Come serve Roanoke. So just to give you an idea how we go out and sell it to the airlines. The master plan, just to give you an update, and these are very high level, and hopefully all of you got a chance to come by the open houses we did, but just to give you an idea of where we are. What we started looking at is the entire airport, not just the terminal, but we started off with the terminal saying, okay, what do we need to upgrade here if the projections for growth continue over the time frame, the next 20 years or so? We know we've got a terminal that's pretty well meets our needs. The biggest challenges to it are that it was built pre-9/11. So it was not built to accommodate a security checkpoint like we've got. So we've got a checkpoint that's in Gate 1 today instead of a checkpoint of its own doing. We've got a baggage claim area that actually has enough surface, but we have a real hard time getting more than 2 airlines with 2 carts in behind it to be able to unload the bags. We know that the gates are some of them are downsized to a regional jet size parking arrangement. Ideally, you want to take all 6 of those gates as the airline industry is going to bigger airplanes and make sure all 6 of those gates can accommodate a narrow-body airplane. We're not getting too ambitious to say we need wide-body gates. We're going to need a few other things before we get there, but we do need the narrow-body gates. We also need to increase our concession space. We've got a lot of space pre-security right now that's really kind of backwards from the way most airports are. But again, the airport was built pre-9/11, so we're going to have to go in and retro it a little bit. We also looked at the cargo area. We've got FedEx and UPS out there today. Both of them fly big airplanes, 757 and an Airbus 300. When you see the parking configuration there, that's because that cargo apron's just not deep enough for it to be able to park like you would like for it to park. You'd like to have it perpendicular to the runway there. So we need to deepen that, and if we want to grow, we're going to need more space. Today, we've got FedEx working out of a RUB building out there, like a tent-style building, good one, not a tent, but a good building. And then UPS really trucks back and forth to the other side of the distribution center quite a bit. So they're adding to our traffic woes across the front of the airport and Aviation Drive because they come over and store containers on the airport. So we're looking at building a bigger area there, basically by taking property that we've bought over the last couple of years and expanding the apron back. And that will give us the ability to expand out to up to 5 or 6 of these cargo-sized aircraft. But again, this isn't a field of dreams. We won't build it unless we have a need for it. But we have to have a plan to address it when it happens. Our general aviation area, a lot of it's been there for years. In fact, the FBO terminal's been there since before I was here in 1992. Small but very nice. But to grow it and to get the big corporate airplanes, we need to kind of start doing a few things like building hangars, build a terminal that is really representative of the valley so that when you come in, you've kind of got that wow factor. I've just landed in a beautiful place because we've got a beautiful view of the range down through there. So let's get a terminal out there that kind of reflects that. We've got an RFP out right now for a new FBO, and part of that ask is that they build that rather than us tie up our dollars to go in and build something like that. Expand the hangars. And then there's something that's new that's called vertiports. You're going to see vertical takeoff aircraft. Whether they're manned or unmanned is not the question right now. We're going to see the vertical takeoff aircraft. It's not like a helicopter. But we need to be able to start planning for that. And you need them in various places. Some of them transport passengers. You want it around the terminal. If it's transporting cargo or some kind of transplant type stuff, you want to get it around cargo. And there's going to be a big GA push to go back and forth to various business centers. So siting those places and being ready for it, getting the utilities, the electricity out there for electric aircraft as needed. All that is part of the master plan. And this is just a concept of what you could do, but really what you're looking at is the area of the old terminal and the old parking lot is where we'll be looking at expanding most of our general aviation, moving the FBO terminal kind of up on top of that hill. We've also got the old Piedmont Airlines maintenance hangar out there that's still in use. Piedmont's still got a lot of high-paying jobs in that hangar. We want to keep them here. If we increase the cost on that hangar, they're going to say, well, why wouldn't I move it somewhere else? So we're going to try to keep their costs down, but find them a new site and get them a hangar that performs a little better than that old 1940s box that we've got out there today. We also need to get that one a little further away from the taxiway and the runways to clear our wingtip clearance for the current safety standards. And the one that everybody wants to talk about is the runway and the airfield. To be able to get anywhere in this country on the national domestic side with any kind of aircraft, we need a longer runway. We've got 6,800 feet today. With the terrain and the altitude that we've got, that's going to challenge us with certain aircraft to get even places like Minneapolis, St. Paul, Seattle, LA. You want to be ready for whatever somebody wants to fly, because somebody tells you they want to fly, they're not going to wait on 6 or 7 years for you to build a runway to get them there. So you're going to try to get ahead of that. That's what we're out there working on now. We've looked at all 4 directions. You can't go north because of the mountain range, and there's just no way to light it up in a way that the airlines are going to be able to take off on it consistently. They'll fly it today if we've got VFR, visual flight range conditions. Go south, everybody says, well, we'd rather have the airports in Valley View Mall. But you still got to cross Hirschberger. You got to buy and tear down the mall. You got to level it all out. And oh, by the way, 581 actually comes back into play when you extend the runway, because to make the runway usable that way in both directions, it needs to slide about 4,000 feet away from the mountains, which puts the end of the runway about where the terminal is today. And it would put the end of the runway somewhere over around Round Hill Elementary. So that's just a very expensive non-starter. Going east, we've got just a 200-foot drop in creeks and everything else out there, and land acquisition. Environmental side, it would just be an extremely expensive proposition. And if you go out there today, you see it along Bent Road, or on the Bent Mountain side, the other side of Bent Mountain, I'm sorry. But we've got a big pier built out there where the extended runway and where the tunnel is on Aviation or Airport Road. That would just have to continue. So you're talking about building a mountain, basically. Again, it ends up making it more expensive than you could possibly justify, which leaves you going west. And as you know, we've got most of the property across the road. It is totally engineering possible to build a tunnel or bridge, whatever you want to do to build a runway across it. Actually, the first one was done out at Denver Stapleton in 1962. It's not new technology, but it's very expensive, and you got a big hole to fill out there. So what this master plan process is doing is saying this is the most logical way to extend this runway. And as we put it forward, what we're doing right now is going back and forth with the FAA on what it might look like. It's not engineered. We've still got environmental studies and all that to do, but we're going back and forth with the master plan. It's not, the master plan is not like a report that you fill out and you send in to the FAA. You're constantly going back and forth, asking their questions, making tweaks and adjustments. And at the end of the day, what we'll end up doing is when everybody's comfortable, we've addressed everything, we will send them a revised airport layout plan. And that's what they will end up approving and saying, yes, this is in your plan and you can start budgeting for it. And a lot of this process is really not just figuring out where do you go, it's how do you pay for it. Because on something like this, you obviously want to use as much federal money as you can possibly get. Most small airports count on about a 90% federal funding source. That'll be a hard push on a project like this one. So we're going to need a lot of help from a lot of sources when we get into this, but that's what this whole process is about. The other area that we looked at was landside. Some of this falls actually outside of our footprint, but we're pretty much 85–90% full on our long-term parking today. We've got the economy parking lot across the street, which it and employees are using today, and it's getting a little busy out there to try to cross Aviation Drive. What we looked at, and we actually took a page out of the city's handbook from the last master plan the city did when they were still running the airport, and that would be to relocate Aviation Drive and expand the parking in front of the terminal. You want to keep it convenient. You want to be able to expand it as you need it. And one way to do that is take the edge of our property, which is that economy lot across the street next to Sam's, and you realign Aviation Drive at some point. So again, it's a concept, it's not engineered, but that would be one way to kind of take Aviation Drive out of the middle of the airport. Because what we're finding is with a lot of the other changes out there is that is quickly, aviation and municipal is quickly becoming a major cut through. And it's really causing issues for people getting across the street and some of the other things, but it certainly would be a much better parking and airport experience if we ended up doing this. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions or refer it to my esteemed commissioners here.
Thank you, Mike. Members of council, any thoughts, questions? Mr. Volson.
I was just looking at the schematic that you gave for the airport. And when we talk about the airport, when being post 9/11, obviously we got to change a lot of stuff at the entrance. Once you get up the top of the escalators there, is there any talk about expanding the actual terminal itself to more gates or anything like that?
That was part of the master plan concept, is that we needed to expand the concourse itself, just give it a bigger footprint for those bigger airplanes. But we are actually working with a task order contractor right now on preliminary design for the security checkpoint and the baggage screening and makeup solution that we need. And some of that could end up changing quite a bit of the way the footprint is today. For instance, we've got an entire suite of offices up on the right side over the ticket counters. That's the widest part of the building we've got, and that might be a great place for a security checkpoint. But obviously, if you do that, you're going to need to change the vertical circulation back and forth and address a lot of the other passenger flow things. So we're working through that right now. But that is, in my mind, that is task one. We need to make sure that checkpoint is ready, because today, if you go out there 5 o'clock in the morning on the days that Allegiant's flying, they've got their A320, Delta's got a 320 going to Atlanta, and then you've got 2 or 3 other 50, 70-seat aircraft. You got a checkpoint that was designed for a throughput of about 175, and you're putting about 400 people through it. So most of them are, the end of the line's usually outside of my office. So we need to address that quick. We also need to address the baggage screening so that TSA can do that efficiently, and then the airlines can get them on the airplanes as they need to. So all of that is will help modify the terminal in a way that kind of makes us more of a post 9/11 airport, in my view.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, anybody? All right, I'll go with Vice Mayor, then I'll go to Mr. Pruitt.
Thanks, Mike.
Yes, sir.
This is a great update.
talking about, I like the concept of the realignment of Aviation Drive. Is that something you see happening pre-extension, if that happens, or concurrently?
We don't think it needs to be done right now. What we're looking at right now is redoing the parking lot, because a lot of it is original pavement and original layout. So I like to say, well, the terminal's post is a pre-9/11 airport. The parking lot was a pre-SUV and pickup parking lot. It's really tight, and we're staying 85-90% full out there. So we're going through a project right now. We're actually just letting the contracts to start renovating the parking lot. That will expand the parking spaces, the drive lanes. It's not going to add a lot of spaces for us. It's going to realign the spaces. We're actually going to make more of a preferred parking lot up front that we can then kind of price and get people where they want to be. But we need to get that done first, then see what our capacity is. But right now, based on the numbers we see, unless we get a lot of new air service, we've got enough spaces. It's just a matter of getting them laid out in the right way. As we start growing, probably somewhere around what we referred to as PAL 2 on the master plan, whereas when you're looking at about a 10% growth over where we are today, now you need to start looking at that parking layout, and whether that is putting in a deck somewhere or additional surface lanes. I think that's where we start looking at the Aviation Drive. Our bigger issue with aviation right now is the crosswalk we've got out there is getting very dangerous. Got a lot of people that just don't slow down and stop for pedestrians. So we're going to have to address that sooner than later.
What's the rental car market looking like these days?
Rental cars have actually been very strong. With the facility that was built just before I got here, serves the purpose as far as checking in and doing that kind of thing. It did really touch the amount of space they need for parking spaces out there or the return area. So we're looking at that, and we'll work with the rental car industry to try to address some of those issues, improve the signage. The way the rental cars work is basically that anything that we do out there, their customers will end up paying for. So you want to give them a bit of say in what we fix. But the rental car market has actually been very strong. Parking and rental cars are our number one source of non-aviation revenue. Parking by far, but rental cars is second. And it's really come back strong through the post-pandemic era. We actually see a lot of people renting cars, coming to the airport, and picking up cars. I've been guilty of it myself, just renting a car and driving somewhere rather than putting miles on your own car. So it's a good market for us. We want to continue to build it.
Excellent. And I just wanted to commend you on the efforts you're making to expand to Dallas and Denver and taking in that bigger market area.
That will really open up the markets for us. A lot of that West Coast market that's a really high percentage of our traffic now, it really make it a lot simpler.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
A lot of cowboy fans around here.
Say that I prefer Denver, but Chairman Bishop, Executive Director Mike Stewart, thank you for being here today for this joint meeting. I have two questions, one focused on parking and one focused on the extension of service. As it relates to parking, I mean, how much have you all considered off-site parking with maybe free shuttles? And as it relates to that, you have the source of destination from where people originate to fly out. Do you have the source by modality? Are people taking the train at all and then getting on a plane, or are they riding the bus? Or I know you have ridership numbers for parking, but just as it relates to those two things.
We do not have a breakout on the logistics of the arrivals yet. That's one of the things we're going to try to do a survey on here coming up in the next year to kind of get a better sense. We know that we get a good ridership off of the bus coming from Blacksburg. We would like to get the bus to maybe go north and hit BMI and Lexington in that area. Maybe even JMU, because it drives right by it. And we actually have quite a few people coming down from that area now. So we want to address those issues. Parking, again, is our number one source of revenue. And as you all know, we don't take local tax dollars. We need to pay our own way. And that's why I like coming in here every March and telling you I don't need any money. But we want to continue to keep that strong. So looking at going to a more remote parking, if we start running out of space, that will probably be our first step, at least on a temporary basis, because that's the easiest thing to get going. The challenge is whenever you introduce busing, you've just introduced the biggest cost next to a parking deck that you can put into the parking product, and that is running a bus and paying the drivers to run back and forth. So it's not a great option for us. We'd rather keep a surface lot if we can, but it is an option, and it's very likely would have to be a temporary option if nothing else.
It's something for us to maybe even consider as we look at the service in Valley Metro, though.
We do want to, and we're promoting the bus. I'm all about an advocate for any way that you can improve access via any mode, because I think that's what we're all supposed to be doing anyway.
And for my second question, as it relates to the extension of service, I know they normally just look at ridership and or flyership, where people are coming from and where they're trying to go. How much in these discussions does it help to have arguments around connections amongst our economy with where we're trying to connect? And then as a second part of that question, a few years ago, the General Assembly had the new airline service incentive fund. Are funds like that helpful, and what other kind of legislative items can you see that would be helpful to the airport?
So in normal times, all of that helps. Right now, it's really more of a fight to keep the service that you have in a lot of cases for a small market. But we do use, and as I think you all know, you're one of the guarantors on it, but we have a small community loan for air service development that would put out roughly about $1.5 million to an airline, both in revenue guarantees and marketing, a SCASP grant. It's supposed to expire in January this year. It actually was supposed to expire in January last year. We convinced the FAA last year, because of the pandemic and everything, to extend it. They have agreed to accept a letter from me to extend it again this year, so we've sent that to them. We're hoping they'll extend beyond January of 24. If they do, we're using that every time we talk to the airlines to say, look, we can not only, in the Dallas case, we showed them a business case where if they flew one flight a day with an Airbus A319, they would have an 86% load factor based on our numbers. On top of that, we're going to guarantee you revenue, and we're going to help you with marketing for the next 2 years, basically. All that should be enough to get service in most cases. The shortage of pilots, the retiring of 50-seat airplanes has kind of turned the whole industry upside down right now. So we are on their radar. We're staying on their radar. The Virginia Aviation Funds, I'm constantly talking to Greg Campbell about what we can do as a state to help entice airlines to anywhere in the Commonwealth. We can't ask him to do something just for Roanoke, but what can we do to, and using some of my prior experience, how can we intensify our recruiting efforts and make Virginia a place that airlines want to turn to? The current plan, quite frankly, is not enough to get an airline to pay much attention to it. And there's not enough money in the aviation funds to probably do that kind of program. So they're going to need to look at how do they maybe turn to economic development money or something like that, that they can make that a little better pot of money. A little bit about service and some of the ways we recruited in the past. At my former location, when you had an international carrier, you could go in and do a deal with the state and say they'll come in and incentivize them up to a certain amount, but it only comes out of the coffers if they actually provide the service. So looking at something like that that would work for a domestic carrier is something that we're kind of interested in seeing what we can do right now, but I don't want to put any kind of words in DOAV's mouth. We're just talking to them about different ideas.
Thank you, Mayor Lee. Just a comment. I'd love to connect Roanoke and the Rockies. I know we are still years away from anything along those lines.
I was born in Aurora, so I'm right there with you. So.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Lee. I have no more questions.
All right. Ms. Whiteboard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mike, thank you, and all of the commissioners for coming for this joint meeting today. I just had a quick question about the extension. It's just all very exciting. All of the improvements, the master plan, I think is very exciting. The extension on the runway, I know it's tenable, and it sounds like it's going to work. It's just going to cost a lot of money. Is there anything in particular that will impede us from moving forward on that, or do you have, because you didn't put any dates on there. I know you've got to do some other studies and so on and so forth, but I'm just curious about a time frame and when we might be able to see this come into fruition.
We are hopeful, and one of the reasons there's not a time frame on there is there's just no way to guess the FAA's time frame on some of these things. But we are hopeful that in the first quarter of this coming year, we will have some answers from them on are they going to support us or not, and then what their potential funding options might be. Once we've got that, then you can, and that has to be based on what we expect traffic to be. We don't have any airlines out there promising to fly something if we get the runway extension. But what we can do is say that we are eliminating a barrier to service. And if we can get them bought in and they approve that, we submit that and get it approved. Then we can turn around and start looking at doing the preliminary projects like getting the environmental work done, doing some actual preliminary engineering so we can put a decent cost estimate together. Right now, the reason I don't talk numbers on what that project might be is you don't know what you're building. Is it just a bridge? Probably not. It's probably got fill and other things that go along with it. We don't know all the environmental issues that we might run into.
Sure.
So it's just one of those things where there's not enough that we know right now, but we would hope that somewhere about, I'll call it middle of next year, we're smart enough that we can start some of that process. A project like this one, you could get it done probably in 4.5, 5 years if you had everything happen exactly right. And I haven't joked with Bob too much about this, but we'll have to improve our planning and permitting process if we get there, because when you start looking at something that maybe is a $500 million project, now you're talking about $50,000 a day, so we need to make sure we've got everything lined up and greased before we get there. But it'll be a multi-year process, and we're not in a hurry to do something that doesn't make sense for us. So as I've said through the master planning process, what I think I owe the community here is getting out and putting this plan out there and vetting it to the best of our ability and getting it approved if possible. And then it's a matter of, all right, what's it going to cost? What's it going to take? And collectively, is it worth it to us? That's where the decision needs to be.
I haven't, been around that long, but I have been around long enough to hear, how anxious we are and how anxious we've gotten to see this happen. It seems like, we're getting closer and closer, but it seems like it's a really, really slow process. And I know it's a lot, and there's a lot of things contingent upon one thing after the other. The economy, our economy, is contingent on it, the leakage. So I guess we just sound a little anxious, because you keep coming back year after year and
Saying the same thing.
Saying the same thing, kind of, sort of. But I do appreciate it. And, your Fly Roanoke campaign, I thought about that when you were talking. It seemed to have helped some. Do you have something like that lined up?
We actually are getting ready to let we've got most of the contracts were expired when I got here, so we've put a lot of them back in place. One that we still need to redo is our marketing and communications vendor. So we're getting ready to put that RFP out. As part of that, the intent is we will start a new branding campaign. Some of the campaigns that have been used here in the past I thought were very good.
I do too. I agree with you. That's why I
think we will do some of that. What you'll see us doing in the meantime, if anybody saw it in the Super Bowl last year, I got a bunch of 5-second spots out of WX, I won't say which one of the local farm stations.
We won't pay attention to that.
That really hit a home run with a lot of people. We're doing a lot of the quick ads. We're working right now with some of the local vendors some of which have done commercials with us in the past to see what we can do to put more local branding on the airport and kind of embrace the community a little bit more in the building. So taking some of those steps is what we're going to be doing in the meantime, but once we get a new vendor on board, kind of doing a branding campaign and going after that Fly ROA piece again will be a key piece, because I would tell you that I think everybody here understands the value of the airport. I think we still have a lot of people in this area that don't understand how aviation works, and they like to blame the airport for lack of air service or the high fares. And I've started telling people every time they hit me with a high fare story, I said, you know how much I got out of that $1,000 ticket you just bought? $4.50. It's called a PFC. So we need to educate the public a little bit better than what we have here recently. So doing some of that, getting that branding back out there and really making sure everybody understands we are the hometown airport. We want to serve everybody in that 2-hour catchment area.
I agree with you. I think that is important, and thank you for that. And that's the reason I asked about that campaign, because quite frankly, I was one of those driving someplace else because it was so expensive. And once you understand, and I didn't understand until I became a member of council, how important it is to, even though it is expensive, to suck it up and to continue to fly out of Roanoke so that we can stop that leakage and get those flights. So I've educated some of my friends, but that piece about educating the public is key, because like I said, I did not understand the entire concept until I was a member of this council, because I was trying to save money just like everybody else. And now I know how important it is.
And
Thank you.
just to hammer that home, I think the important piece of what you just said is you really want to make sure people understand the value of flying local.
Yes.
That's a key piece.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, anybody else? Mr. Volson, you? All right. Go ahead.
I just have two follow-ups. One of the things that I hear from several folks around the city, and I just would like to get this rumor confirmed or denied, I guess, is that our airplane runways are wavered in by the FAA, and so when the cargo planes leave Roanoke, they only leave half full and go to Greensboro and then fill up and continue on.
So there's, waivers is probably one way you can phrase it. The runways today, what the FAA has done is the FAA, over the years, standards have changed. If we weren't safe, we wouldn't be allowed to fly. So we are perfectly safe, and we have an approved exception to the runway safety areas today. So, for instance, I talked about the Piedmont hangar over there. Ideally, you want to have 400 feet clear from the center line of the taxiway, from the runway to the closest object. The edge of those hangar doors is about 8 feet inside of that. You want to be able to get that out of the way and get rid of that exception, if you will, or that waiver. The end of the runway, what they would like to have today is 1,000 feet at the end of the runway that is just clear open space that can either be overrun or undershoot space. We have that on one runway today, and that's the one going north. And the other end of that runway, we have I think which I talked about last year, an engineered material arresting system, an EMAS system, which is basically a bunch of engineered sandbags, runaway truck ramp type thing. But 624, our primary runway, we don't have that option. We've got to drop off at both ends. So a lot of what we're pushing on the master plan is if you don't even believe in extending the runway for us, at least let us hit that runway safety area, fix the hump where the air runways intersect. That's a big project by itself. And if we can get that through, then my argument is, okay, we're going to spend this much money to fix that. Let's go ahead and take the runway out to where it needs to be. But as far as the cargo carriers, they typically do not run full. Some of that is because of the short hop down to Greensboro that one of them does. So it's hard to say what they would do, but both of them have told us that if we had to restrict the runways any further, we would probably run into problems when they get to the next generation of aircraft, which for them is probably the 767-400. So we need to try to make sure we get rid of as many of these hurdles as we can to be able to accommodate those airplanes.
Thank you. And the last question, it's more of a comment. I remember when the airport was built. I remember going to the old terminal, and it's a huge advance. One of the key things with the new terminal was the sculpture out front, the Aurora. She's looking a little, she could use a paint job.
Yes, she does.
These days. So just wanted to put that out there, that maybe that might help a little bit.
That is on my Director of Engineering's radar right now. We had to go find the files in the archives of Iron Mountain to see what's required, but actually we have to get the artist to come in and do that touch-up work. So.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, Ms. Sanchez-Jones.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
One of the things that piqued my interest, you mentioned about the concessions, that you're planning to increase the number, and by how many?
So it's really not a number, it's about finding the right mix.
Okay.
Today, about 95% of our concessions is taking place inside the concourse, post-security.
Okay.
Very little up front, pre-security. So we have Hudson News that does our retail space. They sell a little bit of food. And then Tailwinds has the old Verona air host contract. And they do okay with preheated sandwiches and those type of things. What we're looking at is how do we engage our local community and see what we can bring in from a local flavors type venue. So whether it is food, beverage, I hate to even give this, but a large percentage of our concession revenue is maybe in the form of an alcoholic beverage. So we have a lot of breweries and some distilleries and other things around here. How do we get them in the airport and brand the place and give people, not only the folks that live here, a sense of home, but the visitors something that says, hey, I love Roanoke. So.
That's one of the things that I was thinking, with so many breweries that we have in our community, maybe they could be represented at the airport.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Absolutely.
And also, what is the hours of operation for the concessions?
So they actually try to operate through any departures, but their staffing issues, sometimes they curtail that. We haven't been pushing them too much on the pre-security, the old restaurant up front, because quite frankly, the business just doesn't drive it very much. But that's one of the things that we want to try to address, and we're going to go out and engage and talk to food truck vendors, some people that might be able to run a coffee shop off a kiosk, to get some things into the terminal. But the hours tend to fluctuate, but typically they're going to be there between about 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. on a rough basis, pre-security. Inside security, they're usually there until the last flights are scheduled to depart.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think I'm just hearing positive news about the airport, positive comments. I fly out of there about 2 or 3 times a year, but mine is games or originated, but my son flies every week.
We hear that.
Every week out there, and I tell him I think he's leaving too much, but he's very high on the airport out there, and he very positive. And so I want to thank you all. Thank you for what you're doing, and thank the commissioners for your work. And you all, if there's anything you all want to ask of us that we need to know, I want to always open the floor up. Okay, that's a short time.
And I think we all know this, but when you think about an urban airport, it is unusual how blessed we are to have transportation and air travel this close to the city center. It's unusual, and all we really need is extension on the runway, which is expensive but mild in comparison to building a brand new airport. Then secondly, I thought I might just address the time frame of this runway extension, which none of us know. But I look at this as our economic vibrancy in the future, whenever that is, to be ready. And I believe in Roanoke, I believe in the region, I believe in the integration of the New River Valley, and I think we're going to need it. I may not need it, but I think my children may need it, or their children may need it, and I appreciate your understanding, your patience about it. And then I wanted to talk about our all-stars. So that guy right there was like Santa Claus came to town. I mean, it was just unbelievable that we get Mike. And then, Eric, I want to give a shout out to Eric. Eric should be named Eric Saturday, not Eric Monday. It's just a blessing that we have an in-house attorney of the caliber of Eric. So anyway, I just wanted to shout out about a couple things that are just great about this situation we have here.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, just one thing I want to tell you is the number one thing you can do from my perspective is keep appointing great folks to this body. You've done a great job in the past, and we appreciate all that work and the fact that we have 7 individuals that all represent 3 different jurisdictions, but their interest when they walk in a room is taking care of what's best for the airport, and that's a great thing to work in. So we appreciate that. And then I want to do a quick shout out, and I told Mr. Cal this the other day. The city staff did a phenomenal job with cleaning up the abandoned property across the street between us and Lowe's. And we continue to get just unbelievable comments and compliments on that cleanup. And I know they continue to work it, but we greatly appreciate that.
Great.
With that, thank you.
That's great. All right, we've held you all a long period of time. Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
On behalf of all of us, we appreciate the opportunity to serve.
All right, great. Okay, well, thank you all for coming down.
Thank you.
All right, keep up the good work. All right. We'll stay here until we convene. All right, D. Yeah, you've already adjourned, that's fine.
We'll have to work on that.
All right, Madam Clerk, we're gonna reconvene now and go to the business of the city. All right. Okay, we have a communication from my office requesting that council convene in a closed meeting to discuss vacancies on certain authorities, boards, commissions, and committees appointed by council pursuant to section 2.2-3711 Code of Virginia as amended. And you all have a list of current vacancies, which was included with the agenda. I need a motion.
So moved. Second.
All right, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Ms. White Boyd.
Aye.
Mr. Volleson.
Aye.
Ms. Moon Reynolds.
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez Jones. Mr. Pretty.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cobb.
Aye.
Mayor Lee.
Aye. And the motion passes. Thank you. Another communication from the mayor's office requesting that council convene in a closed meeting to discuss the 2023 Citizen of the Year Award pursuant to section 2.2-3711 Code of Virginia as amended. I need a motion.
So moved. Second.
All right, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. White Boyd.
Aye.
Mr. Volleson.
Aye.
Ms. Moon Reynolds.
Aye.
Ms. Sanchez Jones. Mr. Pretty.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cobb.
Aye.
And Mayor Lee.
Aye, and the motion passes. Thank you all. All right, are there any items listed on the 2 p.m. council docket requiring any discussion or further clarification or any deletions to the 2 p.m. agenda?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. If I could, I would like to see if staff would be on standby to respond to questions on A and B, please.
Okay. So be it. All right. We'll now move down to briefings, but before we do that, I want to ask our attorney if his staff is here to introduce him to us.
Yes, if I could, I'll just go to the podium there.
Okay, thank you.
As many of you know, we've had a number of changes in our office, and I would like to have the opportunity to introduce some of the new people and new faces that you might see if you come into the city attorney's office. So if they could stand up, and of course we have Laura Carini, who is, I'm hoping to change the title, she's Senior Assistant City Attorney currently. And then we also have, we've moved over from DSS, Jennifer Crook, who has worked with us for 3 years, and Jennifer will be now working in the office over here. Now, unfortunately, I was hoping to introduce you to Lita Brim Poindexter, who some of you might know from the community. We've been very fortunate to get Lita, but as happens with DSS, the court comes a-calling, and you've got to get going. So she had a hearing this morning that she was unable to be here with us today.
She was here briefly, wasn't she here briefly?
Yes, but court,
See, I saw her and then she was gone.
again, she had a window,
Yeah.
and we couldn't hit the window
Yeah.
in between court hearings. She had one at 9 o'clock and then later today. So we do have Lita, who's a member of the office. David's also not able to be here. David Collins, who you know, who's been the longest member of our office, and David unfortunately is under the weather and couldn't make it today. But I would also like to introduce you to Kim Beamer. And Kim Beamer is new to our office. Kim came from private practice, and before that was with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office out in Franklin County. Kim's husband works with the Attorney General's Office and is part of working with our Violence Commission and working with the U.S. Attorney's Office, Coleman Adams. So I think that gun violence prevention, we've got a lot of tie there. Jennifer Crook, who is coming here from private practice, moving over, and came from his private practice, will be handling mainly public safety and litigation. Kim's going to be working in code enforcement, public works, and also helping out with litigation. Then we have Jessica Harper, who is here. She's an administrative assistant who came over with Jennifer from DSS. And she's worked with Jennifer for, 6 years total? in both private practice and here at the city. So we're very fortunate. We are fully staffed. We've got our team together, and I just wanted to let you recognize the faces that you might be working with as council in the future. So thank you, Mayor.
That's great. Thank you all. And coming up to the fourth floor, and my office is right outside there. When you have any potlucks and no special things, let me know. I'll gladly come on down without any hesitation. I appreciate that and look forward to working with everybody. Okay, all right. I'm gonna call on Mr. Spencer to introduce the briefings.
One briefing that we have that's come back forward, and it's my understanding that this might be tabled again for future consideration, but this was potential for amendments to city code to add the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. I think there was a meeting of the advisory board, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I understand this matter's going to be tabled, and that we can do a few things that we were proposing in this, such as reducing the number of members so that we can have greater energy and participation, do that even without a code amendment. So I'd open up to council of what your wishes are.
All right. Members of council, any comments, thoughts there?
Do you, how many are you thinking? Same,
Same number
Same
that you have
numbers.
in the draft here, which is reducing it down to seven
seven,
members.
right, seven, okay.
I believe
Yes.
9, it's currently 11, it'd be a reduction of 2.
Or,
It's
I'm
currently
sorry,
11, it'd be a
you're
reduction to
correct.
9.
It is down to 9 from 11. 11's rather large.
Oh, okay, so, okay.
And I'm always pleased to recognize Mr. Clark, who is our Director of Parks and Recreation, is here.
Would it make any sense to have it consistent with the others and make it 7? Because 9 is still relatively large.
It is rather large, but I think that Mr. Clark has a reason for that, and I welcome him to speak to council.
No other reason to keep it at 9 other than that's what's consistent with the Mill Mountain Advisory Board.
Which one, the Mill Mountain?
Mill Mountain
Mill
Advisory
Mountain,
Board
okay.
is at 9, and then the Youth Athletics Board is the one that we just increased to 7. We currently have a handful of vacancies that would take us down to 9 without having to reappoint anybody else.
Yeah,
If
I
we do
was-
go down to 7, folks would have to either give up a term or serve until their term was out and just not get reappointed.
But it's possible that they could just rotate off once their term is on?
Yes, ma'am.
Because I still think 7 would keep it in line with all of the other boards so that we don't have this confusion in the future.
Sure.
That's just my personal opinion.
Mr. Mayor?
All right.
But I
Anybody
do
else?
agree that if we do it progressively, then we're not bumping, asking anyone to step down.
I could see that.
All right. Anyone? Okay.
No, Mr. Mayor, a few notes to make on that point. First, Mike, what is the current diversity of the board makeup largely? Geographic, gender, race? is
So,
it-
in terms of gender, we have a pretty good mix. We have 3 African-American individuals, 2 of which are women. The rest are men. So we have 8 currently with 1 that resigns. We would need to appoint 1 to get up to 9. So 5 white and 3 African-Americans.
And one male, one female?
No, two of the African-Americans are
2.
female, and then we have another female on the
3.
board. So we have 3 females.
what
Trying to go
about
down through my list.
The geographic diversity?
That I don't know. We have a mix of both city residents and non-residents. I won't go so far as to say as we have representation from across the city, but representation as a whole is pretty good.
Mr. Mayor, I would just like to relay that, on the point of reducing the membership to 7, So I visited the last meeting of the Parks and Recreation Board meeting, and I asked them to consider just withholding support of codification at this time. If this council wanted to seek to reduce them to 7, we would need to make them a permanent board with our authority on those lines, or else we could just refuse to appoint people once they only have 7. And I think the codification piece has been largely a dispute of whether or not that is necessary. But over this next year, they are tasked with updating our Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and part of their duties there are to communicate with the public in order to get their feedback, relay the decisions that we make on council, and despite my wishes to see some kind of codification done of this board, I think the most important thing that I recommended to them was take a pause on codification, focus on what your responsibilities are as a board, update the master plan, build some relationships amongst members of council and hopefully the mayor, and revisit at a later point in time. I would hope that this council would not impose its authority to reduce its membership without so much as having a conversation directly with that board, as we're seeking with some of our other bodies currently at this time. So it is my recommendation to them, really, to just postpone for the time being. But I'd rather not put them in a negative state and reduce their members during a year when they have so much work ahead of them.
Other than the reduction of 11 to 9, correct?
Yes, and that one fits well with the number of members that they currently have.
Let me ask you a question, Mr. Pretty. Why do you hopefully they'll build a relationship with the mayor? I mean, it's not difficult, is it?
No, I think it's productive for both members of our bodies and for this council in the other direction to build relationships with all of our citizen-appointed boards to make sure that we're all on the same page, that we're communicating with each other, and that we're working on the tasks that are ahead of us.
Okay, I just want to make sure, I'm not an adversary. I'm supportive of what we're doing and the committees, all of them, I hope so. Hopefully we get a good working relationship with them.
Of course.
Mr. Spencer, what do we need?
Don't need to do anything, Mayor. If that's the direction of council, then we'll go ahead and postpone this. We have it in a draft form, and if it's ever the wish of council to bring this matter forward again, we'll be ready.
Yes.
What about the change from 11 to 9? Is there anything that we have to do?
Council doesn't need to do that. We'll do that by amending the bylaws and taking care of that, and then you'll take care of it through the appointment process.
Gotcha. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, with that, council will be in recess until 2 p.m. for our closed meeting. Thank you.